What's up, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanji, back with another video. Today, we've got a lot to talk about. Big news coming out of the NFL, including updates that could seriously impact the Raiders. And trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Let's get right into it. Vincent Bonsignore, a top insider for the Las Vegas Raiders, the guy who always has the inside scoop, has just dropped a major update. According to him, the Raiders are actively shopping tight end Michael Mayer. Now, this isn't just a rumor. Multiple sources confirm that several teams have been asking about Mayer, and the Raiders are seriously considering moving on from him. This is huge because Mayer was supposed to be a key part of the team's future. But now, it looks like the front office sees more value in trading him than keeping him. So, what's really going on here? Well, it seems like new leadership is making big changes. John Spanos has taken over, and he's working closely with Chip Kelly to reshape the offense. And if we look at Kelly's coaching style, one thing is clear: he doesn't rely heavily on two tight end sets. He likely sees Brock Bowers as the main guy at tight end and prefers a more spread-out offense with multiple wide receivers on the field. That leaves Mayer as the odd man out. It's a tough situation because when the Raiders drafted him, they thought they were getting a future star. They even traded up to get him, believing he was the best tight end in that draft class. But so far, things haven't gone as planned. His rookie season? Rough. Tight ends usually take time to develop, but Mayer struggled more than expected. In his second season, injuries kept him off the field for half the year, and when he did play, he was decent, but definitely not the game-changer the Raiders had hoped for. Back in college at Notre Dame, Mayer looked like a future superstar. People thought he could be one of the best tight ends in years, but his final season at Notre Dame wasn't as dominant, and that trend has continued in the NFL. Now the big question is, what can the Raiders get for him? Honestly, his trade value might not be very high right now. A few teams are interested, but will anyone offer enough to make a deal worth it? That's what we'll have to wait and see. Michael Mayer was drafted high in the second round, but let's be real. His value has dropped. At this point, could the Raiders even get a fourth-round pick for him? Maybe, but that's probably the best-case scenario. His tape hasn't been great, his production hasn't lived up to expectations, and he struggles to create separation on the field. And trust me, teams see that. If you're a team in need of a tight end, what makes more sense? Giving up a fourth-round pick for Mayer? Or just waiting for the upcoming draft and picking a fresh talent? The 2024 tight end class is stacked. Guys like Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green could be available in the later rounds. Maybe not the fourth round exactly, but there are options. Teams might just prefer taking a rookie who comes with a full 4-year contract rather than trading for Mayer, who has only 2 years left on his rookie deal before he needs a payday. So, what happens now? There's a good chance Mayer won't be with the Raiders moving forward. But there's also a chance no team is willing to trade for him. If that happens, the Raiders might just hold on to him and see if he can still develop. Now, will he ever live up to the hype of being a high second-round pick? Probably not. When the Raiders drafted him, they thought they were getting a future star, but it just hasn't worked out that way. Look at a guy like Paris Johnson. His impact was immediate. Mayer? Not so much. That said, he does have value in certain areas. He's shown flashes as a solid run blocker. If he improves his pass blocking and can contribute even in a limited role, maybe 15 snaps a game, he could still be useful. The problem? He might not want to be just a role player. Another key factor here is Chip Kelly's offensive system. Kelly relies on 5-man pass protection, which means tight end blocking isn't as crucial. So, if the Raiders don't plan on using Mayer as a major receiving threat and don't need him for blocking, where does he fit? That's the big question. And speaking of big moves, there's more happening around the NFL. Free agency is just a week away, and teams are already making moves. Trades, rumors, and major signings are about to shake up the league. One of the biggest headlines? The Bengals have franchise-tagged T. Higgins for the second straight year. He's set to make $26 million this season. But here's the thing. This might not mean he's staying in Cincinnati long-term. The Bengals could be tagging him just to trade him later. Maybe in the next week, maybe later in the season, but at some point they might move him to a team desperate for a top receiver. And make no mistake, T. Higgins is elite. He's got the size, strength, and skill to beat double coverage, press coverage, you name it. If you leave him one-on-one, you're going to pay for it. He's one of the best X receivers in the game, and when he finally gets that long-term deal, it's likely going to be north of $30 million. Some Raiders fans wanted Higgins in silver and black. And honestly, the Raiders do need another top receiver. Would Higgins have been a good fit? Maybe. But for now, the focus remains on Michael Mayer and what the Raiders decide to do with him. Now, when it comes to elite wide receivers, last year's draft had a clear standout: Marvin Harrison Jr. That guy is a true X-receiver, a dominant force on the field. This year, there are a couple of names that fit that mold. Tetairoa McMillan looks like a solid X. Colorado has a promising receiver too. His name escapes me at the moment. But the point is, there are options in this draft. And let's talk about the Raiders for a second. They already have Jacoby Myers as their wide receiver too, so the question is, should they trade for T. Higgins? Honestly, unless the Bengals are willing to part ways with him for a fifth-round pick, it doesn't make much sense. Higgins is going to command over $30 million, and while he's a top-tier talent, that's a steep price tag. Now, here's where things get interesting. The Bengals had to clear cap space to keep Higgins, and in the process, they released guard Alex Kappa. And suddenly, Raiders fans are going crazy, acting like Kappa is the second coming of an all-pro lineman. Let's slow down for a second. Kappa is solid. No disrespect to him, he's had success in the past. The guy was drafted by the Buccaneers, played 4 seasons there, then spent the last 3 years with the Bengals. He's been a reliable offensive lineman, but let's be real. His performance dropped this past season. He gave up around 7 or 8 sacks, which is a concern. Here's the issue. Kappa isn't a bully in the trenches. He's more of a steady presence, a guy who can hold his ground if he gets his hands on a defender. But he's not overpowering, and that's exactly what the Raiders need right now. Dominant, physical linemen who can control the line of scrimmage. Think back to the game against the Panthers. I talked about this before. Their offensive line completely dominated the Raiders. They ran all over us, protected their quarterback with ease, and physically outmatched our defensive front. Why? Because they built their O-line with bullies. Ikem Ekwonu at left tackle, Damian Lewis at left guard, Robert Hunt at right guard. These guys don't just block, they impose their will. If the Raiders want to compete at the highest level, they need that kind of presence on the offensive line. Right now, they have a great piece in Jackson Paris-Johnson. DJ Glaze, he still has to prove himself. Maybe he gets another year to develop, but long-term he might have to move inside to guard. So instead of signing someone like Alex Kappa for $5 to $6 million, the Raiders should focus on getting real enforcers up front. This year's draft has some intriguing options. Anthony Belton, Charles Grant. These guys can play guard or tackle, and they bring that aggressive, smash-mouth style of play the Raiders desperately need. At the end of the day, the Raiders have to decide, do they want finesse players, or do they want guys who dominate the trenches? If they want to build a powerhouse, it starts with getting some bullies on the offensive line. If the Raiders want to build a dominant team, they need an offensive line that doesn't just hold the line, they need one that moves the line. Look at Alex Kappa. He's solid, sure, but when he engages with a guy like Chris Jones, it's more of a stalemate. Both players hold their ground, and the running back has to find a tiny gap to squeeze through. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now compare that to when Paris-Johnson makes contact with Chris Jones. Jones is getting pushed 2 yards back. That's the kind of aggression the Raiders need up front. Not just blockers, bullies. And that's why I don't agree with the idea of bringing in Kappa. Not when this draft class is stacked with interior offensive linemen who bring size, power, and an attitude. Look at the talent available. Will Campbell, measured well but likely shifting to guard. Josh Simmons, a bit disappointing in size but could still play tackle or move inside. Donovan Jackson, Had a strong run at left tackle for Ohio State, but let's be real, he's built for guard. Josh Connerly Jr., another potential guard conversion. Honestly, most of the top 10 tackles in this draft might end up as guards. The real question is, who stays at tackle? A few names stand out. Anthony Belton might be able to hold his own at tackle. Josh Simmons has potential, but needs refinement. Charles Grant, a dominant left tackle in college, but probably a guard in the NFL. And then there's my number 1 tackle in this draft, Armin M. He's right on the edge of 6 feet 4 inches, but there's some weirdness between Senior Bowl and Combine measurements. Guys magically get taller at the Combine, but their arm length shrinks. I don't know what's going on there, but there's a chance even Armin ends up at guard. So this draft is going to be tricky. Teams will have to decide carefully who plays tackle and who shifts inside. But that's not the only big move happening. The Eagles just released Darius Slay, and a lot of Raiders fans are asking, should we go after him? The Raiders' secondary struggled last season. A lot of people blame the defensive backs, but let's not forget, this defense was wrecked by injuries. Malcolm Kuntz, out for the year. Christian Wilkins, played 5 or 6 games, then gone. Max Crosby missed a crucial stretch at the end of the season. And then there's Jack Jones. Some fans say he's not a starting caliber corner, but I 100% disagree. Look at the film. Jack Jones was playing aggressively, trying to bait quarterbacks into mistakes. That wasn't just him freelancing. That was coaching. Patrick Graham had him playing risky, high-reward football, expecting the safety to rotate over the top. Problem was, the safety wasn't always there. Isaiah Pola-Mao, for example, he was just a step slow on multiple plays. That split-second delay made it look like Jones was getting burned. But in reality, he was playing within the scheme. So, would Darius Slay fix that? Maybe. But is he the missing piece the Raiders need? That's the real question. Let's be real. Last season, the Raiders' defense was a mess. Injuries, miscommunication, and a system that forced players into bad situations. You can literally see it on tape. Jack Jones is in cover 2, but for some reason, the safety rotates to the other side of the field, leaving a massive gap. Plays like this happened way too often. Now some fans are saying the Raiders' secondary is trash. I don't agree. The reality, this unit isn't as bad as people think. Jack Jones, legitimate corner with insane ball skills. Sure, he gives up touchdowns, but that might be scheme-related. If they tweaked his role, he could be a lockdown guy. Nate Hobbs? Solid. If he sticks around, that's another key piece. Isaiah Pola-Mao, already brought back. Trayvon Mehrig? If they keep him, the safety room looks strong. So, does it make sense to go after Darius Slay? Slay is still a good player, but he's getting older. Would he help? Probably. But do the Raiders desperately need him? Number. If they focus on developing Jack Jones, they could have a top 10 corner. Imagine if he went to a team like the Commanders under Dan Quinn. He'd be an instant star. Quinn turned Darren Bland and Trevin Diggs into elite corners. And look what happened when Quinn left. Both guys started struggling. Cornerback is one of the most system-dependent positions in football. You see players dominate in the right scheme, then fall apart in the wrong one. That's why I think the Raiders should pass on Slay and focus on building from within. Now, there's another name floating around. Osa Odighizuwa. Some fans were like, who? Why would we pay this guy $20+ million a year? Well, guess what? The Cowboys just franchise tagged him for $25 million. Osa is legit. He's only 24 years old and his best football is still ahead of him. He's an elite interior pass rusher, the type of guy every team wants but doesn't always recognize. The Cowboys know exactly what they have and they're not letting him go. They'll probably lock him into a long-term extension worth around $25 million a year. Bottom line, great defensive tackles don't go unnoticed for long.